to ask for the proposed attachment newer to
and declare open. You ready for streaming? Yep. Declare open this meeting of council. Acknowledge that we are on the traditional land of the Wardandi people and pay respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Welcome visitors and advise that the meeting is being recorded for the purpose of minute taking and is being live streamed. We have an apology this evening from Councillor Love and no approved leaves of absence. A prayer this evening is to be delivered by Reverend Axel Hagg of the Busselton Free Reformed Church. Axel, here he is, I think. Welcome along. And we thank you, Reverend, for your time and your blessing of our meeting this evening.
Honourable Mayor Mr. Grant Henley, all present, allow me now to lead you in prayer as we start this meeting. Let's pray. Almighty and Heavenly God, it is a great privilege for us all to be together here this afternoon, to be able to meet in safety and freedom. Lord, forgive us if we sometimes take this for granted. But we thank and honor you as a loving God who provides for our needs. And so we pray, Lord, please give the council members tonight all the mental and emotional strength that they need to run through the proposed agenda. We know, Lord, that it remains a huge and often challenging task for them to sufficiently address the vast variety of aspects, tasks pertaining to our city. So we pray that you, Lord, will guide our Honourable Mayor and his fellow councillors, staff and the different committees in their deliberations. Please give them and everyone else participating a fruitful meeting. May we all pursue whatever is true, honourable, just, pure, commendable and of excellence. We ask you, God, to continue to bless our city of Busselton and the other towns which are part of this shire. And may the churches, schools, medical and legislative services and other corporate bodies continue to support each other in what is serving to this community. We pray this prayer in the holy name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you, Axel, and thank you once again for your time this evening. We do appreciate your blessing of our meeting, and do understand if you do need to leave and can't stay for the rest of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillors, are there any applications for leave of absence? I have not received notification of any. I have received notice of disclosures of interest. Councillor Cronin will be disclosing an impartiality interest in item 12.4, and Councillor Cox will be disclosing a financial interest in item 13.1. In accordance with the regulations, these disclosures will be read out immediately before these items are discussed. Announcements by the presiding member. I was hoping at this evening's meeting to be able to wish Councillor Michaela Love the best of luck as she embarks on her journey of parenthood. However, she has had a loss within her family, sadly, today that's precluded her attendance. But we all do wish her well, and I'm sure she'll be watching at home. So we pass on our best wishes to her and her partner Jack in their future parenthood. I'd also announce that I was honoured to attend the commissioning ceremony of Australian Defence Vessel Cape Naturalist, and the Chief of Navy has approved a ceremonial home porting arrangement between the City of Busselton and ADV Cape Naturalist. The commissioning ceremony was held in Darwin yesterday, and our relationship was acknowledged by the senior naval officer present at that ceremony, and we were very honoured to have that, the first time that an Australian naval vessel has been named after an area within the City of Busselton. So that was a special honour. Speaking of honours, I would like to also acknowledge those members in our community who received honours in the King's Birthday honours list, and I know Mr. Trevor Fitzgerald was among those, and I do apologise for not having the other names to hand for those, and the first King's Birthday honours for quite some years. Question time for the public. We had a response to a previous question taken on notice at our meeting of the 17th of May, and the answer to that is displayed now for the public, and has also been communicated to the asker of that question, and that response provided. Question time for members of the public, and Mr. Peter Kyle has indicated he would like to ask a question of council. If you would like to come forward, Peter, and ask your question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Peter Kyle, Chairman of the Dunsborough Reference Group and a resident of Dunsborough. My question concerns the matter of item 13.1 on the agenda, and in light of that, I don't know whether Councillor Cox will seek to absent herself at this stage, but I merely draw that to her attention.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I listened to the discussion earlier this afternoon, and I'm no further advanced in my question whether the proposal for an adjournment of this matter is receiving majority support or not. So I'm proposing to ask my question on the assumption that it's still an open question, which of course technically it is. My principal concern is the question of the degree of consultation that's taken place up to now. It's reported by the officer comment on Councillor Ryan's alternative recommendation that extensive consultation with the community has been undertaken over the past 2 years since the Pennock decision in February 2021, in relation to the negative outcomes that lack of discretion can create. Apart from one meeting with the resident associations, that is the Eagle Bay, Yallingup, Injingup and Dunsborough associations, at a meeting on the 2nd of February, could I please ask what other consultation has taken place with the communities affected by the special character area policies regarding the proposed change of the town planning scheme?
Thank you for your question, Peter. I will refer to staff who have...
Dave Sands is probably best place to talk on consultation regarding the scheme.
Dave, are you prepared
Sands?
to answer that question? I would otherwise take this on notice, but as it is an item this evening, if you're able to provide that response.
Yeah, sure. There was follow-up, no problem, thanks Mr Mayor. There was follow-up consultation meeting conducted with the Yallingup Residents Association following the meeting Mr Kyle referred to. There was also discussions between the resident groups and the CEO. Following that, there was further informal discussions between myself and Don Best from Eagle Bay. Is the extent of the conversations and meetings that occurred in 2023 this year.
And prior to the meeting in February, were there any other consultation meeting, informal meetings held that you are aware of, Mr Sands?
Last year, I don't think there was a lot of consultation that was undertaken formally with the groups. I know there was some conversations, but there wasn't anything done as extensive as there has been this year.
Thank you. So I
Yes,
suppose that the response is, apart from the February meeting, there were other informal meetings with several of the groups, but not including the Dunsborough reference group.
Yes. I have a couple more questions arising from that, if I may, Mr Mayor. And Mr Sands might like to stay here as a result.
I'd like you to hold.
Is it a fact that the resident associations were informed on the 2nd of February this year, following the meeting with the town planners, that it was not intended to proceed with the proposed amendment, but to deal with the issue in the general review of the new town planning scheme?
Thank you again,
Yep.
Mr Sands.
Mr Mayor, yeah, that was the advice provided at that time to the resident groups, that's correct.
Yeah. Now, Mr Mayor, if I may address this directly at the officers, do the officers agree that these special character area policies are very significant policies designed to protect the special character of the areas by specific policies unique to those areas, and that the residents of those areas, the residents in person, should be personally consulted about any proposed change to those policies by full and proper advertising before the council makes any decision about the matter? I ask that because I note that the officer's report specifically notes that after the adoption of this scheme amendment by the council for the purpose of advertising, and Mr Mayor, you referred to it yourself earlier this evening, the council has no power to stop the amendment proceeding if the Minister for Planning so chooses, once that initial step has been made. In these circumstances, should not the community be offered the opportunity to comment before the council makes any decision, so that its views may influence the council's decision rather than be simply a matter of, well, nice to hear from you, but it's out of our hands now. And lastly, I note that the officer's report suggests that there could be a longer period of advertising of the scheme amendment than is required by the regulations, and suggest, in fact, that 60 days should be used for advertising rather than the 42 days. Now, it's an interesting comment, because if that's the case, then why don't we use the 60 days now? Because that's, from the perspective of the residents of these places, that means that the consultation with them
Sorry, Mr. Cole,
will...
you're getting a bit
I
beyond the
know,
question.
Mr Mayor, I can't stop myself.
Can't help yourself.
Isn't it a fact that...
I will respond to your question.
Thank you,
in
Mr.
that
Mayor.
There have been alternatives proposed, which would essentially establish that period of pre-consideration, and whether council supports that or not will be determined when that item is considered.
Yes, the residents' associations heartily applaud that move by the alternative recommendation. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Sands. I have not received any further bookings. Are there other members of the public who wish to ask a question of council? Mr. Sims?
Thank you. It's Keith Sims. Good evening. Thank you, Mr Mayor, councillors, CEO and everyone else. I only have one question. There's been a lot of publicity recently about the well-known absolute critical housing shortage, especially rentals in WA, including Busselton, Australia and most of the world. It has been recognised elsewhere that the high number of short-term holiday homes like Airbnb are a major contributor to that shortage. The unhosted facilities are the biggest problem, which also can contribute to a lesser quality amenity for the neighbours, not personal holiday homes. I've previously been told in this chamber there is no correlation between Airbnb and the housing shortage. So Byron Bay is planning a maximum of 60 days rental. New South Wales in general has a maximum of 180 days. Brisbane has increased rates by 50%, but now has increased them by a further 65%. Hobart has doubled the rates for short-term rentals, and the City of Albany is currently considering their increase. London has 90 days maximum, and Portugal is not registering any new Airbnbs at all. And that's just to mention a few examples. The City of Busselton increased the rates by 10%, which is in one way is good, which would have no real impact on the owners running their rental business. And I think that's what should be noted. It's a business. The city appears to be tourist-centric, and I'll give a recent example. Ford Road, Duke Street development, to the comment from the Deputy Mayor that it was a benefit for tourists. Question, why can't the City of Busselton make similar changes that I've just mentioned to the short-term holiday home rules, like a maximum number of days short-term rental is available and substantial, meaning rate increases like other councils and states and internationally have done?
Mr. Sims, you may have heard I did respond to some similar questions on the television in relation to Hobart's announcement, but we are certainly well aware of steps that have been taken in other states and jurisdictions, which in a lot of cases have different regulations to Western Australia. You may also be aware that we are awaiting the outcome of the 2017 parliamentary inquiry, where the state has suggested it will introduce legislation at some time, which will seek to impose a regulatory requirement on the platforms to ensure that their properties who list with them are registered. However, they are also suggesting, and I've heard different figures of 60 to 180 day exemptions from those requirements to register, which would then abrogate any requirement and would make totally unenforceable any regulatory framework that we seek to impose. We are looking at and have initiated a 3-stage regulatory process, one of which was the Code of Conduct, which was derided by Airbnb as the harshest in the country. We've also, as you pointed out, added the additional 10% differential rate that businesses pay for marketing and events to Airbnb registered properties. Airbnb registered properties number around 1,000 registered households, slightly over, which makes up about 4% of our residential housing stock, and about 20% of our housing stock was empty at the last census. So most of the properties that are empty here are non-commercial private holiday homes. But we do acknowledge that the removal of properties from the residential long-term market, long-term rental market for short-term rental in Airbnb has caused issue at a time where there is a shortage of housing and where we certainly have a shortage of housing being completed, with over 1,500 houses under construction at the moment, more than we have as holiday homes.
I understand about holiday homes, but what people do with their holiday home and not rent it out is up to them. It's not a business. But the Airbnb type properties, they are running a business, and it's the unhosted, which is full house, not 1 or 2 rooms. That is the issue, and it's been recognised, as I've just said, worldwide. And I have acknowledged, and in positive sense, what the City of Busselton has been doing with short-term holiday homes, but I think this, what I've just talked about, needs further attention. And I do know about what you've told me, and I disagree with the state government's 60 days, I thought it was, where you don't have to, if you up to 60 days, you don't have to register.
The state has said 60 days. However, when I questioned the ex-premier at a recent forum, he did let slip they were considering a 180-day exemption.
Either way, it's a stupid idea, and I'm certainly on your side for that. It makes a mockery of having registrations and what the rest of the world is doing anyway.
So the city is considering other measures, but we are certainly reluctant to go through the process of introducing those measures should the state's legislation render them unenforceable.
But the state has been talking about it for, what did you say, 2017. That's 6 years and they've done nothing. So are we to wait another 6 years to wait to see if they continue? We should be looking at what we're doing now and then deal with what the state government wants to and try and have some influence on what the state government want to do.
As we have been lobbying for the last 5 years, Mr.
Yeah, and I agree with that and I understand that.
It's understood that there's possibly some announcements coming out by the end of the month or close to, so hopefully it's not too far away, Mr. Sims, and we'd know a bit more where that situation
Okay, thank you. And maybe the new minister might have a different slant on it, hopefully. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sims.
Can I just ask Mr Sims a question?
Yes, Councillor Cox.
Mr Sims, do you know where these additional measures have been implemented in other cities across the world? What percentage conversion then those Airbnbs have gone back to long-term rentals? Has there been any research done on that? I'd be interested to know.
I haven't tried to research that. I've just read what they have actually implemented.
I think that's probably, would you agree that that would probably be useful to establish where measures have been implemented, then what percentage of those Airbnbs then go back into the rental market? Because my assumption would potentially be that you couldn't compel the Airbnb owner to then return it to the long-term rental market. They may just leave it empty like the other holiday homes. So it would be interesting to see the research, I think.
I did ask the federal minister if the federal government would consider removing the negative gearing rights for short-term holiday lets, but they said they weren't going to revisit that after suffering some feedback last time. And I can also comment on your statement you made regarding Byron Bay. They did seek to introduce a 60-day cap and it was refused by the New South Wales State Government.
Okay, so they've still got 180 days.
180-day cap.
Okay.
And again, I would like to talk to my peers in Byron Bay and Airlie Beach and other affected communities and ask them how they enforce that cap, because I believe it would be unenforceable.
Well,
without significant resources to police.
I would agree that enforcing anything is the same as the number of guests in a Airbnb. Was 12 and now it's 10, but it's not enforceable. Who enforces it? I had the 12, as you're aware, the 12 guest one alongside me. People could have been coming in with sleeping bags or whatever because so many cars were parked there the other night. There was more than the number of guests that should have been there.
And all that we can do is to go after properties that advertise for more than they are allowed.
Oh, the one across the road from me was a maximum of 12.
Okay. And as I said,
anyway,
all we can do is go after those that advertise.
I'm agreeing
for more
with you that things aren't easily enforced. But with what...
Sorry, Mr Sims, I think we've given you a bit of latitude.
Yes, you have, and I appreciate that. But not everyone who wants to get out of an Airbnb would put it back to a holiday home and not use it because they do it to make money and have it as a tax deduction.
Indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Sims.
I do appreciate the time you gave me.
Yes, we have one more question.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, councillors. I'm Helena Nicholson. You've probably seen me around. I've been in this chair before. I just have a question because I'm reflecting on the Abbey South precinct, and I know that that's been pulled for tonight, but I think it's a broader, almost ideological question, and I don't work in local government and I don't work in planning, but my question is it possible for the City of Busselton to lead the way? Now, currently, if a developer proposes a new development, they may put something forward that doesn't fit the requirements of the city. So if the City of Busselton were to specify the terms for development, proposing new developments and insisting on specific demands and requirements that are suited to the residents and the environment, rather than the opposite occurring, where the developers put the plan forward, then they need to... I see that it's putting the cart before the horse, where the developers go, we would like to do this in this place, and then there's a whole lot of argy-bargy and presenting these different amendments and assessments, and it's a waste of time and money. Whereas you, as a City of Busselton, could say, this land needs a bespoke development. All of the other local governments across the state are saying, maintain the canopy. Here's a tract of land. All of these trees need to remain. It's not a blank canvas. We can't pop the roads in and make rectangles. We actually need to make it retain the vegetation, preserve the biodiversity, and make the developments sustainable, because it needs to be on our terms. We only get one go at our land. So the question is it possible for the City of Busselton to lead the way and insist on developments being bespoke and suited to our needs rather than the opposite way around?
I'm not sure I can respond in totality, because that would require some explanation of the Planning and Development Act. However, the final arbiter or the final decision maker of subdivision of land is the WA Planning Commission and the State Government through the Minister. The City has some input through structure planning and articles such as those that we are considering at this evening's meeting. However, we do need to be careful in what we ask for that is reasonable, and has to be reasonable in the circumstances, and we are certainly looking at having development guide plans or other articles that are more in tune with modern and contemporary environmental design and livability than perhaps those that were approved 2 or 3 decades ago, and that we are now only just seeing the tail end of being developed. So we learn from the mistakes of the past, and hopefully we do what we can to ensure that we have livable neighbourhoods that respect the environment that they are situated in, but which also go to seek to address the housing needs and shortages of a growing population that we need to do as well.
Can I just quickly ask, has the rezoning been approved from conservation to urban for this development? No.
No, not.
So is that what the WA Planning Commission are actually assessing? They will say yay or nay that the rezoning can occur, because currently it's conservation and rural.
It is a mixture of conservation and rural, and
Yeah.
my understanding from the plan is those areas that are conservation will be preserved under this plan.
So none of the conservation zoned area is up for development on by
I'd have to
this.
defer to the
No,
planning staff.
that's not completely accurate. A portion of the conservation lot has been investigated and the EPA was referred the designs, and the portion to the east of the current conservation area has been assessed as not having high conservation value, which is reflected in the structure plan that's been put forward.
Okay, but the bottom line is that the conservation area that is zoned is going to be changed and built on.
Potentially.
That is the proposal of an area that was assessed by the EPA. But there are other areas of the rural area that will be preserved that have remnant vegetation. So hopefully we can have a mix there.
Yeah, and the rural area itself is identified in the city's local planning strategy as a planning investigation area for future development.
Yeah, which is why this has come up as a structure plan.
Yeah.
Okay, and are they going to chop down all the trees that are there, or can they design around it? Because really, what we've seen recently is bulldozers coming in, bowl them over. They're there already, why would we bowl them over? That's
As
fine.
I said, we are hoping to address some of the sins of the past with some better decisions
Great.
and designs for the future.
That gives me confidence, thank you.
Thank you for
Thanks for
your
your
question,
time.
Helene. Yes, please, sir, if you'd like to come forward.
Bill Kilner from the Abbey Precinct Concerned Residents. My question, following on what Helena was asking about, and it's very straightforward. The environmental, traffic and drainage reports for the Abbey South Precinct were written under R20 rating at the beginning of the report. However, at the end of the report, it reverts to R60 rating. And the reason given for this was questionable criteria. 1, being near a lane. 2, being near open green area. And 3 was 400 metres from Monaghan's Corner. My question to you, Mr Mayor, is do you agree this is the case, and was this done to maximise developers' returns?
Sorry, I would have to refer again to planning staff if they're able to respond to the question.
Am I correct that your question is around why there's R60 zoning included on the...
Why it started at R20 at the beginning and at the end refers to R60 on the grounds of 3 criteria. 1, being near a lane. 2, being near green playing area, or 400 metres from the Monaghan's Corner.
I think
So the question is around the diversity now of...
Well, how it changed, basically. The process from R20 to R60.
So the initial assessment being done on R20 and then now areas...
Ended up at
proposed
R60,
under-
which is high
and the
density.
impacts that has on the traffic analysis.
It's everything.
Yeah.
I mean, when you talk about your report that comes from the guiding principles in your preamble, the guiding principles are talking about understanding the local vernacular and characteristics that make Abbey a unique place with geographic region and all those sort of things, and talking about we will have 4,000 people impacted by this addition of 1,000 people living in that area. It's going to have huge impact on everything in that area. So how come it comes from an R20 rating and at the end it's an R60, which is high density? From 1,000 square metre blocks, you've gone down to the end on those 3 criteria, which are very specific, and I don't know how that gets through.
So across the structure plan, the average density will be R20.
How many R20 properties in that area?
David, do you think you could answer that one? Do you know it inside and out? given a map of that.
So I understand that the average density in the development proposed is R20, given that there are a number of properties that are R10, which balance out those at.
No, but
higher
how many properties are R20 or R10 compared to how many properties that are R60?
But it's also a percentage of the total land mass as well.
Yeah, because you're talking about a 250 square metre block. That's what you're talking about.
Joe, do you think you could get the map up? Just while we're...
There's a big difference. It means more people. I mean, if it was an R20 development, then you got to have 1,000 square metre
I would
blocks.
just get a map up to display what the officers are responding to your question, Mr. Keeler.
The yellow colour shown on the structure plan there, which I suppose is about 80% of the structure plan area, is a density range from R20 to R40, and the criteria that you've referred to would be how the density would be applied, and that's to provide flexibility of the housing product that's offered throughout the structure plan area. Predominantly, there would be an R20 zone that would be used, with also some diversity of R30 and R40. The R60 areas are limited to the land adjacent Busselton Highway, both the blue centre zone and also the brown colour there that's indicated just adjacent to Busselton Highway. This would be a more medium density product of R60.
So how many properties would that be in those brown and blue areas? Individual properties of 250, 350, 400, like they do in Vass. Like in Vass, we got how many? 2,300 properties there. And in Busselton, in Abbey, I think we've got 1,300 properties, 2,000 people, 1,900 people. So you're talking about 3,900 people living in Vass and Abbey, and now you're going to add another 1,000 to that area. And I don't see this, it's going to be crowded in that area. I don't see that being spacious and that. Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, I think the area shown in brown, which is the R60, would provide for a smaller lot product. It's very different to say how many lots would be provided and what they would look like. That would be determined at subdivision stage. But definitely it's contemplated it would be at a higher density than what the remainder of the structure plan area would be. The blue local centre area, that would look more as a mixed use development as opposed to houses, given it's got a centre zone.
Thank you. Councillor Ryan, you had a question?
Mr Sands, it's my understanding that it's council staff that have been pushing for the smaller blocks, and especially in this location, because it's got to do with the direction that WAPC are going, in that it's close to the road, so therefore people might not have a car and they'll catch the bus and so on. So is that what happened? That the developers actually were happy to have larger blocks, but it's the city that are pushing for smaller blocks?
Look, I think there was a conversation there. The opportunity of some medium density definitely presents a pretty good case in that location, being close to an existing centre of Monaghan's and also public transport. It's generally pretty well screened from Busselton Highway as well, with existing vegetation. So staff were supportive of that medium density code of R60.
So that's a staff direction, not...
Sorry, sir. This is a question. You have asked your question. We are
Okay.
responding to your question.
Yes.
Councillor Riccelli, you had a question.
I have two questions. Can you perhaps clarify, I'm sorry, I've forgotten your name.
Bill Kilner.
Bill Kilner, that there are no R10 blocks currently on the structure plan at the moment? That's question number one.
That's correct. Yep.
Question number two, all of the light brown, as you mentioned, R20 to R40, how can you know that will
predominantly end up as being R20. Surely a lot of that is in the developer's hands and a little bit out of our control.
Could I just go back to the first question? I think the area to the southwest actually did identify some R10 in the original proposal.
In the original one,
Yeah.
but there's none now.
Yeah, that's correct. As to your second question, again, difficult to ascertain at this stage in terms of the block size, but definitely what would present itself if we looked elsewhere in the city of Busselton is through the use of an R20 zone, which is a minimum of 450 lot size. There generally tends to be a larger lot size that's delivered up to 800 square metres.
But am I correct in that this isn't singly designated as an R20, it's designated as R20/R40?
That's correct.
So
correct.
that's a big difference from just being designated as R20.
That's correct. I mean, in discussions with the proponent on this, the first stage, I think, would largely deliver block sizes around R20. The density range is to provide flexibility of lot product as the subdivision progresses. It's not in the officer's mind to be used to deliver small blocks, predominantly through the structure plan area.
360, I understand. 360 blocks. 28 million.
Right. Yep.
dollars.
If you do the maths, I haven't done those maths.
Thank you, Mr. Kilman.
Thank you.
Sorry, this is to ask a question, and I'm going to have to be rather firm from now on. We do also have an opportunity during our meeting process for parties with an interest, so those directly adjoining the item on the agenda have been approved to come and make a presentation. We also had the public agenda presentation opportunity at last week's briefing session. So if people are coming up to make a statement or enter into debate about an item that is on the agenda, I will not allow that. You are allowed to come up and ask a question of the council. That is what this part of the meeting is for. And I have allowed some latitude so far, but I will be rather firm now. We do need to move on with the meeting. Did you wish to ask a question of council, madam? Thank you. If you could state your name, thank you.
My name's Dawn. I'm a resident of Abbey. I just wanted to ask, how will you determine if referral to the EPA under the EPBC Act is required due to the fragmentation of the possum habitat linkage at the access points? It's mentioned in the notes
In the report.
that there may be a
Maybe
referral needed. Yeah.
Mr. Sands, are you able to respond to that question?
Absolutely, yeah. The scheme amendment proposal, Amendment 55, was referred to the EPA prior to advertising, and the EPA did not assess the proposal but did provide some advice around that matter, the protection of vegetation, particularly for corridors of vegetation, particularly possums. The EPBC referral is a proponent process that would need to be addressed by referral to the Federal Environmental Agency by the proponent. Would be required to be done by staff.
Thank you, Mr. Sands. Sorry, just your surname for the purpose. Blanchard, for the purpose of the minutes. Thank you, Dawn. Are there any other members of the public who wish to ask a question of council? We'll move on to item 8.1. Sorry. Lost my place. 8.1. Item 8.1 is to confirm as a true and correct record the minutes of the council meeting held on the 17th of May. Do I have a mover? Move Councillor Riccelli, secondly Councillor Richards. Is there any opposition? No, I put the motion. Those in favour? It's carried 8-0. Item 8.2 is to confirm as a true and correct record the minutes of the special council meeting held on the 31st of May. Moved Councillor Ryan, seconded Councillor Carter. Is there any opposition? If not, I put the motion. Those in favour? Is carried 8-0. Item 8.3 is to note as received the unconfirmed minutes of the Policy and Legislation Committee meeting held on the 10th of May. Move Councillor Ryan, second Councillor Richards. Is there any opposition? If not, I put the motion. Those in favour? Is carried 8-0. Item 8.4 is to note as received the unconfirmed minutes of the Audit and Risk Committee meeting held on the 7th of June. Moved Councillor Ryan, seconded Councillor Carter. Is there any opposition? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Carried 8-0. Item 8.5 is to note as received the unconfirmed minutes of the Finance Committee meeting held on the 7th of June. Is there a move Councillor Riccelli, seconded Councillor Cronin. Is there any opposition? If not, I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Is carried 8-0. Presentations by parties with an interest. We received a booking from Mark Kane. Mr. Kane here. If you would like to come forward, Mr. Kane. Can you change the microphone? Thank you.
Good evening, Mr Mayor and councillors, CEO and everybody else here this evening. My name is Mark Kane. I'm here to address the Abbey South Structure Plan Associated Amendment number 55 to Local Planning Scheme number 21, which is aimed at changing current rural conservation zoning to urban development zoning. In my opinion, the majority of the land is owned by parties that obviously know nothing about farming and rural activities, as they let their properties degrade to unworkable levels. I mean, 3 or 4 bonfires pushed up, not lit for years, while out-of-control rabbit infestations ruin the land and give neighbouring property owners major headaches. Weeds and pests ravage their land while they sit around playing their hand at property development. Recently, I travelled to Thomas Road, east of the freeway, which connects to Armidale and Byford. Along that road, there are small intensive market farms, some bigger, some smaller than these plots, creating fresh fruit and veg and salad for our consumption. If these current owners of these properties are not interested in agriculture and using their land for purpose that it has been specifically zoned for, maybe they should sell it to someone who will. In 2019, the land was protected wetland and designated coastal reserve buffers between Abbey and Vass to avoid urban sprawl and create distinct communities. Reference Lure Naturalist Ridge Policy Statement of Planning Policy number 6.1. This was amended in 2021, obviously as a precursor to the amendment we're discussing today. I can't remember the community consultation to allow this amendment to be passed. Anyhow, not only are they below average farmers, they make for worse developers, in my humble opinion. What they're proposing to create at Abbey South, with the majority of dwellings being built on small lots, approximately 450 square metres or smaller, inevitably the houses will be quite large for the block size, close to each other, and there will be no adequate room for the movement of air and green spaces. This leads to increased heat and the need for people to run large aircon units to have adequate cooling in their house. R20, R40 might be common coding for new subdivisions in this contemporary profit-driven era, but to say it is in keeping with the existing character of the locality is clearly wrong. I could use stronger terms, but I'm trying to contain myself because the rapid and unsustainable development of new housing developments in our area can often come at a cost to our quality of life and is very annoying when you've been a long-term resident paying rates, taxes, living a sustainable and modest life in the suburb country you love, only to have it turned on its head for the monetary gain of a chosen few. Back to the Lure Naturalist Ridge Policy PS 1.17 settlement pattern. Development which necessitates servicing and infrastructure requirements may be supported, provided efficient energy use is promoted, water quality of river systems are not degraded, effective nutrient management, characters of the locality is maintained or enhanced. Remnant vegetation and fauna habitats are not threatened. So what about the nutrient runoff into the wetlands, into the Bunyip Drain and then into the ocean? Well, what about the obstruction or the destruction of the remnant vegetation and fauna habitats, which will definitely take place? Old growth trees have not been retained on lots. Who needs trees, eh? All they do is provide the air we breathe. Reading through the schedule of public submissions, issues raised time and time again were reference to the Abbey boat ramp and fragile foreshore along Abbey Beach, raising concerns of the impact of significant increased traffic. Council comment was repeatedly, the Abbey foreshore is located outside of the project area. That statement, in my opinion, is a total cop-out, an insult to everyone's intelligence who's submitted. Reference to the 100% increase in traffic congestion, which already bottlenecks at key times of the day and year, creating dangerous, precarious traffic flow and road conditions. Council comment was repeatedly, Main Roads WA and Council are working on revised road designs. Well, surely these road plans need to be finalised and presented to the residents that the developers are working so closely with before a decision on zoning can be made. Finally, another classic comment, whenever concerned residents made it clear that the subdivision should be shelved under the completion of the vast Dunsborough link that would provide safe and efficient passage thereafter due to major decrease in local traffic. Traffic modelling demonstrates the vast Dunsborough link is not required to facilitate the proposal. It would seem Main Roads and Council would rather take instructions from AI than listen to the real-life road experiences of 90 well-written submissions from living, breathing men and women. So in my conclusion, I ask the councillors of the City of Busselton, who do you represent and advocate on behalf? The people of Busselton who voted you in to represent them and their families, or other parties with vested interests? Thank you for your time.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are not at a circus. I ask you to respect the council meeting process. There's no need for applause. We understand that you support the speaker, but we are in a council meeting. The next presentation booked is from Dawn Blanchard. If you would like to come forward, Dawn, you have 5 minutes, and then council may wish to ask questions of you.
So, hi, my name's Dawn. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I'm a concerned resident who lives on Caves Road. I've lived in the Abbey area for 12 years with my husband, and I have 2 young boys. Our home is one of the properties opposite the planned main entrance, which will be one of only 2 access points if the recommendations go ahead. Obviously, I'm very disappointed about the proposed changes to our viewscape personally, and the major increase in noise and light pollution potentially directly into our living room is a huge concern. What I'm more concerned about is the safety of myself and my family when entering and exiting our property from a significant increase in traffic movement from up to 1,000 cars a day and the possible road modifications directly outside our home. It could also limit access to our own property with the road modifications, and I believe Caves Road is not wide enough to accommodate major modifications without encroaching on existing residents and destroying and fragmenting critical possum habitat. Why should I have to only make certain directional turns to enter and exit my own property and not be able to have the safe capability to reverse a camper trailer or caravan into my own backyard? As a family, we currently ride our bikes to school along the drain cycle path and can already be waiting to cross Caves Road for up to 5 minutes in the morning and afternoon. Even then, it feels unsafe, and if a collision was to occur with the car speeds of 70 kilometres plus, as they are approaching an 80 kilometre speed limit zone, it would very likely prove to be fatal. Main Roads have confirmed that they're not considering reducing the speed limit alongside the development, which would pose a critical safety issue for new and existing residents. These access points will also push a considerable amount of traffic around the northern beach side of Abbey. Lots of traffic is already known to go around the back of Abbey to avoid congestion on Caves Road. This will cause an increase in potential accidents through the suburb, with an adjacent increase in pedestrians because of the development. During peak periods, the cars bank up from the roundabout past our house and to the RAC caravan park, and this would provide limited traffic flow for existing or potential new residents leaving the proposed access point areas. Council noted that Caves Road has sufficient capacity to accommodate average traffic volumes expected from the development, independent of the vast Dunsborough link, but traffic projections in the impact report do not account for other housing developments taking place in Dunsborough and Busselton as we speak, and those in the future which will also significantly impact Caves Road. In the summary of agency submissions 2.13, it is noted by Main Roads that the proponent has utilised traffic data from a remote counter location located a significant distance to the west of the proposed development site for analysis purposes, which does not account for all existing traffic to the north or west and is therefore not deemed appropriate. Main Roads considers it necessary to review the traffic data in the traffic impact assessment to provide a more representative traffic context for review of the potential impacts of the proposed access arrangements on the existing road networks. It is also noted in agency submissions 2.1 that the proposal raises a number of network planning concerns which has not been addressed to Main Roads' satisfaction. In particular, Main Roads has concerns with the proposed external road connections onto Caves Road and Bustle Highway from a traffic safety and efficiency perspective and does not support them. It is noted that the proponent and Main Roads have not yet been able to fully resolve these issues within the statutory timeframes that the city is required to provide a recommendation on the proposal, and Main Roads proposes further investigation be undertaken. It would be great to see clarity on this point from Council. Also, I believe the original reports on the proposed development are based on the zoning of R20 to R40 lots, and since then a portion of the structure plan is now zoned R60, with lots as small as 180 square metres. Isn't there a need for updated reports based on this new zoning? The projected number of cars per household, for a start, will not be accurate in the existing reports, and the potential for impact is higher on all accounts. With inaccurate reporting and network planning concerns by Main Roads themselves that have not been addressed, I urge you to defer your decision so more accurate and thorough investigation and planning take place. If the vast Dunsborough Link Road was planned within the next few years, this would all make more sense. But as stated at last week's council and in Main Road's summary, this is 15 to 20 years away. Imagine the amount of traffic using Caves Road in this time frame if we keep saying yes. So that the impacts of this development can be further investigated and that solutions be found before these problems are created. As a council, I ask you to be proactive and seek further information before making a decision, so in years ahead you don't have to be reactive.
Thank you. Are there any questions, councillors? Thanks.
Thank you.
The last booking received as a party with an interest is from Ms. Cameron Leckie, representing the developer. Ms. Cameron, you have 5 minutes, and then councillors may wish to ask a question of you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and good evening, councillors. Cameron Leckie from Rise Urban, representing the landowners. Also just wanted to point out that I'm joined today by Michael Stewart, who's the owner and resident of 67 Caves Road, which is Lot 4. I'm not going to repeat my presentation from last week because I felt like I had a good hearing with the council and there was a lot of intelligent questions asked, and I felt like we had a really good discussion. What I did want to cover off was that since last week's meeting, I've sent you 2 emails by way of sort of follow-up clarification from some matters that were raised. The first deals with the traffic matters and tries to articulate in clear and simple terms that a full movement access onto Caves Road is essential if the land is to be developed to provide for some of Busselton's future housing supply. B, it seems that all parties, i.e. Main Roads, the city and our consultant team now agree that a T intersection can work in this location, and now it's just down to the actual design of that intersection and how it works. C, that a full movement intersection onto Busselton Highway cannot be achieved due to the higher traffic volumes and the proximity to the existing roundabout at Monaghan's. And that, lastly, that a deferral of your decision to allow traffic matters to be fully resolved will only further delay the resolution of these matters. Just yesterday, I spoke with the planners at the Department of Planning on this particular matter and was advised that the department and the WAPC, quote, will not, has no formal role to play until the city has provided its advice to the WAPC. In non-bureaucratic terms, this means that they're simply not interested in engaging with us until they're required to by the legislation. To reiterate, we cannot hope to fully resolve the traffic-related matters, although we are getting closer, without the WAPC and Main Roads at the table. For this to occur, the city needs to provide its advice to the WAPC, and the WAPC can then make a decision with the full picture in front of them. The second email that I sent you tried to deal with the confusion amongst the community as to the density coding across the site, and I think we've heard a little bit more about that tonight. I hope it's now clear to the council, at least, that we do not propose R60 small lot development across the entire project. The R60 area shown on the advertised structure plan is roughly 3% of the entire structure plan area, and only a percentage of that area will actually be developed for medium density housing, because at least 5,000 square metres of it is zoned local centre, and then there's roads and POS to come out of that area as well. It's also worth noting that the R60 area wasn't part of our original proposal, and it was only included at the city's insistence in the first place. So I would say to the council, if you don't like it and if you don't want it, take it out. The third point that wasn't covered via emails during the week but needs to be quickly touched on once more is that, contrary to some of the community perception, we're not developing or destroying any conservation wetlands. The low-lying floodway features that are on the property are to be retained in full and will be handed over to the city as public open space over and above the 10% contribution that we're required to provide by government policy. This approach has the support of the government's environmental agencies, including the EPA, DWER and DVCA. Now, I'm aware of the alternate motion being considered to defer, to defer council's decision for a further 2 months. The reasons being given are to allow resolution of traffic-related issues, including investigations into a full movement intersection on Busselton Highway, and to introduce some additional R10 coded areas to allow for larger lots as a transition. On the first point, I spoke with our traffic engineers this morning to explore the possibility of a full movement intersection on Busselton Highway adjacent to our structure plan area. Their response was that this is a hard no. Not only would Busselton Highway need to be widened to provide deceleration lanes and turning pockets, which would wipe out the front of the Amelia Park Tavern site, but it would also necessitate another roundabout or possibly even traffic signals immediately south of the Monaghan's roundabout to allow right turn movements in and out of the site. Now, given this, along with the higher order status of Busselton Highway and the fact that the volumes on Busselton Highway will go up when the VDL is built, whereas the volumes on Caves Road will go down, it's extremely unlikely that Main Roads or the WAPC would support any sort of full movement intersection in this location, and I'm concerned that time spent investigating this would almost certainly be unproductive. The traffic matters on Caves Road itself have been pretty well covered in the lead up and last week. Yes, it is a complex issue for the council and for the community to grapple with. We get that. And we want to help to achieve the best possible outcome for all involved. The reality is that a full movement intersection onto Caves Road is the only suitable option to serve the Abbey South cell if it's to be developed as per the state government's vision. And now it's a matter of determining the most appropriate location and design of that intersection to maximise safety and to minimise impact to both the environment and to the community. And that's what we're trying to work through with Main Roads at the moment. We cannot fully resolve this until the structure plan has been referred to the WAPC by the city. The second recommendation to introduce some more R10 lots as a transition area to the RAC Holiday Park and public open space is a new one to us, and I only just saw the plan on the screen half an hour ago, so please bear with us. But look, I can see where the council's coming from. There's probably some merit in incorporating some of that in the plan. And if it's something the council feels strongly about, then a more direct route would be to simply add an additional line item in the schedule of modifications at attachment G. And then the WAPC, as the decision maker of the structure plan, can then weigh up the merits of the recommended modification along with the other 14 recommendations that are already in the schedule. Overall, we remain focused on working with the city and government agencies to achieve the best outcome for the development area and for the existing community. However, we've also reached a point where further deferrals and delays are likely to achieve little more than to simply delay the process, and with little or no benefit to the council, the community, or to landowners. All the while, the housing shortage in the southwest region continues to worsen. In closing, I'd urge you once again to support the officer recommendation and to allow the structure plan to run its course with the WAPC so that these crucial issues can be addressed holistically and by the decision maker. And with the Mayor's permission, I'm happy to answer any further questions the Council might have.
Thank you, Mr Leckie. Councillor Riccelli, you had a question?
Yeah, thank you, Mr Leckie. I'm just wondering if you've read the agency submission from Main Roads.
I did, yes.
Yes, because they actually indicated in there that they preferred Busselton Highway as the primary and a T-junction. Now, I appreciate, obviously, looking at the proposed structure plan at the moment, where you've got the, the entry and egress at the moment, it's not going to work because it's too close to the roundabout. But certainly there was discussion with planning officers as to whether you could move that right to the edge of the development, so where that last dotted line was. And they were certainly willing to engage with Main Roads to actually determine if that was a possibility.
And sorry, I'll let you finish.
Yep. Well, and I guess I was asking, it was interesting that Main Roads have actually indicated they prefer that as their primary road, and I was wondering if you're aware of that.
Very aware of that. We had discussions with Main Roads back in, I think, 2020 and 2021 about this exact matter, and their view was that their ideal scenario would be having access through Lot 8 onto Busselton Highway, which is south of the Amelia Park site. The Planning Commission, in their wisdom, didn't include that site within our structure plan area, so it's not within our ownership and it's not within our structure plan, so it's just not within our gift to give that road as part of it. And any further north, we start running into conflict with the roundabout, which is the point I was trying to make before. So we can't, the advice I've got from our traffic engineers, who have got between them over 50 years of experience in doing this, is that the Main Roads and the government will not allow a full movement intersection on the north side of the Amelia Park Tavern site.
Even if you moved it to that very far border?
Yeah.
Can I perhaps get some advice from planning? Because I know we did discuss this, on your thoughts around that?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, currently at Amelia Park there is a full access driveway that they are using. So, whether or not that does pave the way for some potential for a greater, control intersection than left in, left out. I do think it warrants further investigation as to whether a right in or a right out could be provided. I understand there is a conflict with the roundabout, the close proximity of the roundabout that's there.
Thank you. Councillor Cox, you had a question?
My question is just around some clarification of the density. The R20 to R40 across the majority of the lot. Can you give me any kind of ballpark percentage of what you would perceive as being R20 and what would you perceive as being R40? And would you be willing to consider having more R20 as opposed to R40?
Yeah, sure. Look, to go wind that back a step, Councillor, the idea of the split density code is to allow for different housing types in smaller areas. So it's not about a blanket upcoating or about trying to squeeze as much yield out as we can. And that's why we have the locational criteria in the structure plan. So it means that I think the way it's written is that the R20 code applies in all instances, except where if you have a rear laneway at the back, or if you're directly opposite the central open space spine that runs down the middle of the project, or if you're within 400 metres walking distance of the Monaghan's store local centre. Now, I guess we're dealing with those in reverse order. The Monaghan's store local centre, it's considered good planning practice to have higher densities in closer proximity to activity centres, and I'm sure you're aware of that already. So that was the rationale for that one. In terms of the rear laneways, the idea is that when you take away the garage off the front street, you can get some tighter housing product in there, but the laneways come at a cost because it's essentially building an extra road. So it's not viable to do these everywhere, and you'll probably find, well, certainly we find in most of my projects that developers are busy trying to design laneways out of projects at the moment because it's just not cost effective for them. And I think we also, anecdotally at least, I've heard it at VAS, the laneway product is always the last one to sell for them because it's difficult to move and they can't get the prices down low enough to meet that part of the market. So I would say that the uptake for that in this project is probably going to be quite low. And then in terms of fronting the central spine, generally you might find it, and apologies to those behind me, but you might find it on the ends of a cell like that where you might have some shorter, like what we call squat product. It might only be, say, 15 metres deep, but be a traditional frontage along there. So it's got a smaller area but still presents as a traditional home, if you like. And again, it's just about finding different points in the market, in the housing market, to provide different types of products.
Because I guess from our point of view, as we've heard tonight from one of the presenters, it would be nice if you could offer a different product to what has already been offered through Vass and Abbey, because it's just the same subdivision.
Councillor Cox, question.
The question is, are you prepared to offer a slightly different housing product to what has already been offered in those areas?
Look, yes, we will offer whatever the most contemporary product is at the time, and whatever I guess my clients think that there's a point in the market that would accept that. I guess that's the fundamentals of land development, that there needs to be a buyer for whatever gets put on the ground. But certainly we're open to not doing exactly what everyone else has done, and that's very much the point.
Can I just ask a quick supplementary? Would you acknowledge that perhaps there is a market for a different product, given that the same product has been offered many, many times through Dunsborough and Abbey and Vass already?
Yes.
Thank you. If there are no further questions, thank you, Mr. Leckie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor, we now move to the adoption by exception resolution with the committee recommendations for items 12.1, 12.2, 12.3, 12.5, 12.6, 12.7, 12.8, 12.9 and 12.11, and the officer recommendations for items 14.1, 15.1, 15.2, 16.1 and 17.1. The mover for the en bloc resolution, moved Councillor Cronin, seconded Councillor Richards. Is there any opposition? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? It's carried 8-0. Item 12.4, Councillor Cronin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On item 12.4, I'd like to declare an impartiality interest on this item, as I am a member of the Metricup Bushfire Brigade, and as a consequence, there may be a perception that my impartiality on this matter may be affected. I declare that I will consider the item solely on its merits and vote or act accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cronin. Is there a mover for the committee recommendation for item 12.4? Moved Councillor Cox, seconded Councillor Payne. Is there any opposition? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? It's carried 8-0. Item 12.10 is a recommendation of the Finance Committee in regard to amendment to the adopted schedule of fees and charges. requiring an absolute majority. Move Councillor Carter, seconded Councillor Ryan. Is there any opposition? If not, I put the motion. Those in favour? Is carried 8-0. Absolute majority achieved. Item 9.1 is a petition received in regard to a playground at Ardfin Street, Dunsborough. It's been pulled by officers with an amended recommendation. Is there a mover of the amended recommendation? Move Councillor Ryan, seconded Councillor Cronin. Is there any opposition? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? It's carried 8-0. Item 13.1. Councillor Cox, you wish to make a disclosure?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I wish to declare a financial interest in item 13.1. As I have a financial proximity interest, the proposed amendment 56 to Local Planning Scheme 21 Special Character Area consideration for initiation for advertising, as my residence is located within the Quindalup Special Character Area. Given this interest, I will leave the meeting while this item is being considered. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. In regard to item 13.1, an alternative recommendation has been received from Councillor Ryan. Would you like to put your alternative, Councillor Ryan?
Yes, Mr Mayor, I move that the council defer item 13.1 until the ordinary council meeting of 16th August 2023.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Richards. Is there opposition? There is opposition. If you would like to speak to your motion, Councillor Ryan.
Thank you. There is concern within the affected community groups that the current officer's recommendation formally triggers the initiation of the amendment rather than allow informal consultation of those residents affected in the special character areas initially and then resume the process of initiating the amendment at the August meeting. Whilst I am mindful that the matter needs resolution, the Pennock decision was determined in February 2021, and a few weeks' delay will ensure that our community members are given the opportunity to consult with their respective planning consultants and inform their members and in turn ensure that the council are fully aware of any issues arising. The officer's comment suggests extensive consultation has been undertaken with the community over the past 2 years since the Pennock decision in relation to the negative outcomes that lack of discretion can create. Informal consultation has previously occurred with residents of Eagle Bay, Yallingup, Dunsborough, Quindalup in relation to this matter between February 23 and May 23, and officers feel it is unlikely that further informal consultation on this amendment will provide residents groups any additional clarification to what has already been provided to date. However, the response from REBA back in early February 23, REBA plus representatives from associations of other potentially affected communities were invited to a meeting with the COB planning officers to discuss the concept of what is now the proposed Amendment 56. Following that meeting, all the associations received written advice from COB advising that council officers had decided not to proceed with an amendment and the issue would be addressed during drafting of the new LPS 2022. REBA were also advised that as part of the new LPS there was a need to update the current special character area plans and consider how they would be integrated into the new planning scheme. Planners advised that they would like some associations' input into the updating exercise and would be in touch to arrange discussions and meetings and workshops in this regard. We have therefore been caught by surprise when advised on the 1st of June that the amendment option was back on the table and will be put to council meeting on the 21st of June. This is very short notice and gives the association very limited time to engage some independent professional planners' advice and engage with the community. Then make informed presentations of concerns to councillors prior to the issue being debated at a formal council meeting. We would therefore ask councillors to consider deferring any debate on this item until August council meeting. This will enable time for potentially affected communities to understand the detail of the proposed Amendment 56, now that an officer's report has been tabled on the issue, and interact with councillors prior to any formal debate should concerns be identified. The Pennock ruling occurred on 12th of February 2021, which is nearly 2.5 years ago, and it is difficult to imagine that it has been causing unacceptable hardship to orderly planning if it has taken this long for an amendment to be proposed. Hence a request to defer council consideration of the issue for a further 8 weeks does not seem unreasonable. Officers go on to suggest that if the officer's recommendation is supported, the process will need to be followed through to completion, being either the adoption or refusal of the amendment by the Minister for Planning. That is, once initiated by Council for advertising, the final determination on the amendment will be the decision of the Minister, not Council. Point 4 suggests that Council note the City will proceed with the following further stages of review of the special character areas to undertake a broader review of the special character area framework, which includes the related scheme provisions and suite of local planning policies, and as part of the review, the City will engage with the community to inform the preparation of a revised planning controls consistent with the contemporary planning framework. Allowing the deferment would in effect allow the killing of 2 birds with 1 stone in that issue relating to discretion and a review of the special character area. It will in fact uncover any issues, if indeed there are any, and not allow any applications which are requesting discretion at this current time, consequently easing up any technicalities that staff may have. We gave a similar consideration to the people of Marybrook and surrounds with the Chur maps. This is a win-win situation. Councillors, as Mr Kyle noted earlier, there is an opportunity for officers' recommendation to go out for advertising for 60 days. Once again, allowing deferment will not significantly change the progress of this item, and I urge you to support this deferment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ryan. Councillor Richards, did you wish to speak as a second?
I'll exercise my right.
Thank you. The Speaker against the alternative?
Mr Mayor, can I seek clarification on Councillor Ryan's discussion, the words that were just read? There was an old sort of moving between third person and first person tense where she was quoting or reading somebody else's arguments, and it's not entirely clear whereabouts it changed.
I do believe you received the email from Reba. Mr. Best.
It's just the email, was the rest of it is your words. Okay, thank you.
Is there a speaker against the alternative recommendation? Councillor Riccielli.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I would like to foreshadow an alternative motion should Councillor Ryan's not be successful, and that is basically to resolve not to go ahead with the amendment at all. So I guess it's taking it one step further, and instead just adopt point 4, which would be to undertake the broader review and consultation. This is by no means a criticism of Councillor Ryan's intent, and in fact I share the same concerns and we're working towards the same outcome. However, I do believe my alternative will provide the community with a much longer period to gather the advice they seek, probably up until December. And it will also allow for natural processes to take place through the local planning scheme number 22, which will be at least 2 years away, rather than for us to take matters into our own hands and initiate this amendment now. I fully appreciate the examples the planning officers have shown us whereby not having...
Sorry, Councillor Riccielli, point of order. You are speaking to your alternative.
Okay.
You need to speak in opposition to the proposed alternative recommendation prior to...
I will seek to explain my reasons further, but that's the reason why I'm voting against. Sorry.
Councillor Riccielli, further, if you do foreshadow moving point 4 only, you'll need to obviously have that as a point 2, And your point one would need to be that council not
To resolve not to go
the scheme
ahead,
amendment. Yep. Which will resolve should this alternative not be successful. Is there a speaker for the alternative recommendation? Speaker against? Councillor Payne?
Briefly, because I don't think that, I tend to agree that the timing probably doesn't make that much difference in the grander scheme of things. However, at the end of the day, the options are going to be that the discretion is returned through the adoption of the new, or ultimately the new LPS 22 through this amendment process, or suppose this amendment process was adopted for advertising and then not adopted, and then the WAPC does it anyway. One way or the other, that's the end result. There has been a lot of discussion about the level and quantum of consultation, but it needs to be kept in mind that it is just one thing, A, Roman I in the amendment is changing one sentence at the end in order to restore the status quo of what was the 20 years prior to 2021. And you may agree or disagree with that, but ultimately the discretion will come back one way or the other. So, I don't know.
Is there a speaker for? Councillor Carter?
Yes, Councillor. Look, I'm speaking for this motion not because I feel it's going to make a huge difference, but because I feel that if the community feels that they haven't been consulted appropriately or have been misled and would like further time, this gives them a period of time in which to get some advice on how they feel that will impact their current rights. Not in response to what Councillor Payne said, but in relation to returning to the status quo, while that might be what this is trying to achieve, we have been told that the status quo had been interpreted incorrectly. So really, if the way that the special character area matters within the current planning framework mean that there shouldn't have been discretion, and that's legally how it's been determined, then we need to respect that until we decide to change it one way or the other. I think by giving the community a little bit of time to have a look at how they feel the changes should be made, then we can give it to them. So that's why I will be supporting Councillor Ryan's proposal to defer the matter until the 16th of August.
The speaker against? Councillors, I will rise to speak in favour of the alternative recommendation, and I do not usually favour deferrals. I think we are required to make decisions. However, in this case, I do have some concern at feedback from the community that they were given some information following a short period of consultation, and there was in fact a differing course of action that we have undertaken, and that perhaps they've been taken unawares, or that people in those organisations in key roles weren't aware of what was happening. I do also acknowledge that this is a very small restoration of what has been in practice effectively for over 20 years. There are dozens and dozens of houses in these special character areas that were built in good faith with an element of discretion, and this does need to be restored. It is a matter of time now, whether it's done through this process with the scheme amendment, or whether we wait until the town planning scheme. But the difference between those could be several years, and we've heard from planning staff that this could impact these seemingly innocuous lack of discretion could impact someone putting solar panels on their roof or a TV antenna, which is ridiculous. However, we do need to do that. I don't believe that we're going to lose too much in deferring the item until August. It will give, as Mr Kyle suggested, those groups time to do some preemptory examination and research into what the potential impacts could be, and then we can come back and look at the scheme amendment in August and go out for the required period of advertising, or should it be approved by council at that time. Therefore, I'm happy to support in this instance the deferral. Thank you. Is there a speaker against? Speaker for? Councillor Cronin.
Look, yeah, on deliberation and having been contacted by a number of people from the community, I likewise have to say that based on probability and the time that's going to allow us to look a little deeper into this and make sure that we're clear on where we're going, I will also agree to defer. Thank you.
Speaker against? Seconder? Can you turn your microphone on, please?
Sorry, I'm learning what this means. Yeah, short and sweet. I think we've covered the bulk of the issues here, but the reason for my support of the alternative is that the residents have been given opportunity to meet with the city staff and were informed in writing that this was not going to go ahead. So for them to see this amendment on the agenda would have been a surprise. And I think they deserve our respect in the fact that they are looking to seek professional information at their own expense to make sure they're well informed. So for that reason, I am supporting Councillor Rye's alternative, but acknowledging Councillor Uccelli, your alternative, foreshadowed alternative as well. Thank you.
Councillor Ryan, right of reply?
Nothing further.
Thank you. Councillors, with that, I close debate and put the alternative recommendation. Those in favour? Opposed? Still? Is carried 8-0. Thank you. 7-0. Thank you for that clarification. Councillor Cox can now return to the meeting. Councillor Cox, for your information, the alternative recommendation was carried 7-0. Councillors, item 13.2, an alternative recommendation by Councillor Cronin. Would you like to move your alternative, Councillor Cronin?
Thank you. Yes, councillors, I wish to put forward my alternative recommendation 13.2 as outlined in front of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a seconder, Councillor Cronin? Councillor Uccelli. Is there opposition? There is opposition. Councillor Cronin?
I thought I didn't have to speak then. Councillors, the key point to this alternative recommendation is to gain an extension of time for the proponent to work with the city in resolving concerns that have come from this public consultation. We are being asked to adopt the Abbey South Structure Plan for final approval. Now, that does continuation with modifications in attachment G, but as we've already unfortunately heard from Rise Urban, they've indicated that there's a cold no on the Busselton Highway. So already we're seeing that alternatives are not necessarily working out. This amendment, the concerns I've got is that we are putting forward something and the residents have kicked up a fuss about the road intersections. The main roads have kicked up a fuss about the main roads interface. DFES are concerned that there should be at least 2 entrances so that they can fight fires and save people's lives. And really it comes down to the point that if we don't have a clear understanding of the impact the design, the location of these intersections, it's very difficult for us to get the residents, local residents, on board with this offering that we are going to propose to the WAPC. We currently have 9,600 movements of traffic on Caves Road, over 10,000 movements on Busselton Highway. Now, I'm not saying that even another 1,000 movements would impact that road per se, but the way they join that road, the way they interact with that road and closely linked other intersections is where I have my concerns, as raised by a number of issues. So I really don't want to talk too much more to this than I'm asking simply for, on this item, item 1, for an extension of time so that both parties can sit down and come up with something that is a little bit more solid, that we have a little more say in than simply handing it over to WAPC and allowing them to come back with something that we may have less control over. Now, with regards to item 2, which incorporates the lower density R10 amendments, our values, as we state all the time, is where environment, lifestyle and opportunity meet. I can see that a lot of this land is actually quite primed for development. It has more or less been cleared. There are not too many trees there, which I do hope remain. But as we move further south, actually, may I ask that that map is reintroduced? Thank you, the new one, thank you. Just so that I can talk to this. So as you can see to the south, and if we actually had an overlay here, we've got the wetlands. Now, I will concede that if you go down to the site, if you look at the southeast corner, a lot of that, and EPA have likewise said that actually that can be developed. It's not environmentally, the fauna and flora is not, is not protected, and there is no damage. But the reason we've done this, we're looking at these R10s, is to make, as I said, that soft buffer, so that we are not putting lots of houses closer to those wetlands. We're not putting lots of property closer to a tourist park. Now, admittedly, somebody might not want to live directly next to a tourist park, but also if you go to a tourist park, you might want to be directly behind somebody who's watching the grand final or whatever. So really that is to create softer buffers. It also creates a more dense area for nature to progress into this structure plan. And with regards to those other areas of the 20 and 40s, if you can see the amount of green space that Rise Urban have actually put into there, there are a lot of considerations to the nature side. They are keeping the buffers up the top. And look, I think other councillors will probably talk to this, but that is also the way I think that the R10 would be a softer transition, a softer buffer to those areas. So look, in conclusion, I feel that I would be more comfortable as a councillor in adopting a more defined proposal, including the intersection designs, the locations of these, and the layout designs with regards to the zoning that take into account our environment. Thank you.
Councillor Riccioli, did you wish to speak as seconder?
Yes, thank you. The structure plan proposal raises a number of traffic concerns which the proponent, the City of Busselton and Main Roads have not yet been able to fully resolve, or even partially resolve really, within the statutory timeframes that the City is required to provide a recommendation on the proposal. There are concerns and a lack of resolution with the proposed external road connections onto Caves Road and Busselton Highway from a traffic impact, safety and efficiency perspective. There are also serious concerns with the traffic modelling that has been done to date. The proponent has utilised traffic data from a remote counter location located a significant distance to the west of the PIA for analysis purposes, which does not account for the existing traffic from the residential precinct to the north of the PIA or other residential areas such as Siesta Park, as well as tourism developments to the west. Main Roads have advised themselves in their agency submission that the data included is not deemed appropriate for traffic analysis and modelling purposes. Further investigation needs to be undertaken to determine an accurate traffic count, its impact, the most efficient and safe option for entry and exit to the area, alongside consideration for the potential impacts to accessing properties fronting Caves Road. My other concern is the number of small blocks or high-density areas being proposed in the plan, i.e. the R20 to R40 and the R60 zoned areas. I believe a revision to the density codes of the structure plan is required to firstly address the very legitimate concerns raised by the community over the proposed density of the structure plan. The current proposal anticipates a yield of up to 400 dwellings. Whilst it is obvious how this will impact traffic along Caves Road, which as we all know is already bursting at the seams, what needs to be realised is the lack of services to complement this growing population. The agency submission from the Department of Education Public Schools articulates that the Abbey vicinity is approaching or operating at accommodation capacity under current circumstances. Although a possible school is outlined in Vass West for the future, this is not expected to occur for some time. The agency's submission clearly states that with the addition of a further 400 residences, student accommodation capacity issues will be experienced in the short to medium term. In other words, in layman's terms, that means that there is not enough schools to cater for this increase in population. The provisional lower density code, namely the R10, will reduce the overall density and importantly will also cater to the current demand for larger block sizes in the region. The R10 zones take into consideration relevant legislation such as SPP 6.1, which designates that the area should be a wetland amenity area and recommends that subdivision development should complement the existing landscape character and protect the environment and recreational values of the area. Finally, inclusion of R10 coding provides for a more visually appealing and natural transition between the high-density urban areas, the caravan park and public open space. This alternative seeks an extension to allow for the above to transpire and a revised structure plan to be submitted by the proponent. I urge you to support Councillor Corrinen's motion. Thank you.
Is there a speaker against the alternative, Councillor Ryan?
I'll speak against, Mr Mayor, but I'll also foreshadow the officer's recommendation if this one falls over. I have every sympathy for the residents in Abbey, and in fact I met with them to give them advice initially on what issues they could raise. The officer's report says that the Vass-Dunsborough link is not required to facilitate the proposal. Correct. It is not the developer's concern that the Vass-Dunsborough link has not been built and will not be for a further 10 years. The environment assessment found that majority of the structure plan area is capable of urban development, subject to floodway areas being provided as open space. And also the site largely consists of cleared agricultural pastoral land. The city has worked with the developer to retain trees. However, the developer is only required to provide 10% of the site area as public open space, and trees have generally not been retained on lots. The environmental assessment found that majority of the structure plan area is capable of urban development, subject to floodway areas being provided as public open space. That's all in the report. A lot of the issues revolve around the traffic in that area. And I agree, it's horrendous. You go there in a morning, you go there of an evening or school time, it is horrendous. At our peak tourism season, it is above horrendous. But are we going to suggest that we stop the tourists coming in? Because that would be a great solution. So suggesting that the developers have somehow got control over what main roads do or don't do is a real problem for me. I do recall that main roads were going to construct a vast Dunsborough link some 15 years ago, and now we're told it will be another 10 years. And we also heard earlier that it was the staff that are pushing for the smaller blocks, because, councillors, you will recall we had a presentation in the early days from the developers that said these will be larger blocks. My final comment, Councillor Riccelli, is that I'm not sure what the provision of schools has to do with the developer as well. Thank you, and once again I'll foreshadow the officer's recommendation if this falls over.
Thank you, Councillor Ryan. Is there a speaker for the alternative recommendation? Councillor Carter?
Councillors, I'm not going to talk in relation to the proposed structure plan at length. I will just talk to the matter of the deferral of this matter. Oh, hang on, I'm meant to be speaking against because I want to propose an amendment. Sorry.
You can propose an
Sorry?
You can propose an amendment.
Oh, okay. I think we're, in relation to point 1C of Councillor Cronin's amendment, I am just not sure whether we should be, at this point in time, saying that the solution is a T intersection, because it may well not be the best solution in relation to addressing those 3 points. So I would like to propose that we refine the intersection preliminary road layout concept for the Caves Road intersection, so not actually stipulate whether it is a roundabout or a T intersection. That is an amendment that I would foreshadow.
To remove the T?
Yep.
The T,
Yeah.
May I speak?
No.
No, I was just to that.
So yes, so I am proposing just
Sorry.
that.
Is there a seconder for that amendment? Seconded. Is there opposition to the amendment? You wish to speak against the amendment? The removal of the T from T intersection? Yes, I would like to keep the T. Councillor Carter, speak to your amendment.
Simply, I don't think I'm a traffic expert, and I don't think I have the technical expertise to determine what. Where's the Darby? Was that an intentional cough? Sorry. I don't think, like us as councillors, are here to provide technical advice on or professional advice on whether a T or a roundabout intersection or whatever may be the best alternative to resolve those 3 problems, and that is why I'm proposing the alternative to remove T.
Amendment.
The amendment to remove the word T.
Thank you, Councillor Carter. Councillor Cronin, do you wish to speak a second?
Yes, look, I actually totally agree that we shouldn't lock ourselves down to something that there may be a better alternative, and I'd probably actually let that one slip through. So yes, classic, being too close to something, but yeah, totally agree with it. Thank you.
Speaker against?
I agree with Councillor Carter that we aren't traffic experts or civil engineers. However, notwithstanding, I do know what a roundabout is, and if it was a roundabout, I wouldn't accept it. So I'd like to keep the T.
Thanks, Councillor Payne. Is there any further debate for or against the amendment? There's not. I put the amendment. Those in favour? Opposed? Is carried 6-2. Becomes a substantive without the T before intersection in point C. And then you can continue.
And in relation to incorporating areas of lower density to the west and south of the sites, I'm supportive particularly to the south but to the west, I'm not. I don't see the transition to a car park, to a caravan park as a significant thing that we need to be protecting as opposed to transitioning to an environmental area. I think, as we all know, housing is a significant issue for our community, and while yield on this site will impact people in terms of the impact on traffic and that sort of thing, we need to be mindful that our role is to look after the entire community, and that includes, where possible, being as efficient with the developable land that we have, and providing as much opportunity on that land that we have, so that we're not in a situation.
Sorry, Councillor Carter, you're speaking in favour of the deferral?
Yep. Okay. Yes, I won't propose an amendment. Sorry.
In favour of the deferral as amended,
The deferral is amended. Thank you.
This motion, which is still under debate,
Thank you. Is there a speaker against? Councillor Payne?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. First, I want to say off the bat that I agree with the motion and the concerns that have been raised around the intersections and so on, which is odd because I'm speaking against it. But I just wanted to focus on the positives rather than the negatives, because, like I said, I do agree with the concerns. But if you do switch back to the map that was with the R10 and so on, and have a look at the developed area, in particularly the tree canopy of the developed area, the tree canopy of the main Caves Road link and the Busselton Highway. Basically, look at the tree canopy across the entire map. What you'll notice is it's better everywhere except in, like, the site itself is the worst out of all of what is visible. And it will be like that across the WA, or rural land looks like that. If you look around at in the mouth part on the southeast, and you can see there's a little house with a lot of trees around it. That's what people like when they have houses. They like to have trees around them, which is why, I guess on top of the side of the road, you've got thousands of examples of the same thing. The point of all of this is that, yes, there will be the negative impacts should it be approved. There will be traffic congestion, and there will be some loss of tree canopy in places where it is unavoidable. But it can also be better than what's here, particularly in the north-south green wiggly bit that goes up the middle there. That at the moment is fairly reasonably tree, but it has zero ground story, which is possible to rectify if it was to be developed for urban use. And that ground level, that ground story, is what allows a small possum, or unfortunately cat, to go through those areas without the risk of predation from the cat. Yeah, it can be better than it is. It doesn't have to be all bad.
Is there a speaker for the alternative? Councillor Richards?
Thank you. I support the alternative, including the amendment by Councillor Carter. The lack of agreement by the decision makers regarding the traffic movements indicates that more discussion needs to take place regarding this issue. I do acknowledge the information provided by the city staff that main roads are open to discussion, and also Mr Leckie advising that complete resolution is unlikely to occur without the WA PC and without the structure plan being submitted. What is important to recognise is the significant impact this development will have on this intersection, the residents, to the visitors of the district, as well as the environment, and discussion needs to continue so alternatives can be put forward to demonstrate to the residents our commitment to achieving the best possible outcome. I also support point 2 of the alternative relating to zoning, and I'm encouraged by the advice from Rise Urban that the landowners would prefer larger blocks. This was the initial presentation by the landowners, and it kind of had all of us a little bit excited, I think. And given the other developments that have occurred with a large number of higher density lots, this particular development is an opportunity to create a bespoke development that creates a unique offering in this special location.
So that was a speaker in support of the alternative recommendation? Okay. Councillors, I'm going to speak against the alternative recommendation. In this instance, I don't believe that very much will be achieved by the deferral of this. This was identified through both the Lewin Naturalist Ridge Statement of Planning or Planning Strategy, of which I was a member of the group along with the WA Planning Commission who examined various areas throughout the city and the region, and also was part of developing the local planning strategy through our planning scheme, both of which documents identified Abbey South as developable, and indeed WA Planning Commission has designated this as an urban area, from planning investigation area to urban and open space investigation area. So that horse has already bolted. It's been done. As I mentioned earlier to the speaker, our job is to ensure that the plans that we put in place, the structure plans that are put in place, are empathetic and sympathetic to their environmental surroundings, but also that we do address a lot of these issues. Now, the developers already said, and they've been emphatic in this, that until such time as WAPC and main roads are brought to the party, they will not work on helping to make that solution, that final solution for some of those issues that will be encountered, such as traffic. There will need to be some delivery of solutions that are perhaps interim solutions until longer term road networks are developed. And I was also part of council when we delineated the Vass-Dunsborough link. And I'm ashamed to say that was over 10 years ago and we're still no closer to getting that delivered by main roads. However, hopefully with development that is envisaged and foreshadowed coming forward, that we will see that develop sooner rather than later, and there will be some pressure on them. I am given some comfort by the fact that this section of Caves Road that is impacted is a main roads controlled road, and so therefore it will be their problem should they not engineer a correct solution with the developer. Main roads will be responsible for rectification should there be an issue, and we've seen that already in the city of Busselton at areas such as Fairway Drive opening onto the bypass, where retrospective engineering solutions had to be developed. So in closing, this area has been designated for the purpose. I think it delivers a good diversity of land for residential purposes. It does preserve a large section for conservation, and the development will ensure that there is provision of blocks that are big enough to have a tree in the backyard, and won't be, and that those areas that are too small to have inherent vegetation in them will be close to POS that does deliver that green space and livability in that neighbourhood. There are a lot of issues there, and schools are one. They are certainly an issue that we do need to consider, but they are determined by the WA Planning Commission, the size of the development, whether there needs to be land ceded for provision of a primary school will be up to the WA Planning Commission to determine, and may certainly bring forward the need for a second primary school in Vass, as we know exists, and the planning is underway there already for Dawson. So with that, this planning is already well underway. We will not achieve anything by deferral in this instance, and I will be foreshadowing supporting the officer recommendation should this motion not be carried. Thank you. Is there a speaker for? Councillor Cox.
I'll be really quick because I think we've all been here for long enough tonight. I support the amended alternative recommendation. I would just like a little bit more time to consider this proposal, and given the number of community submissions on this proposal, I think we probably do owe it to the community just to spend a little bit more time looking at. I'm not confident that we can get any resolution around the traffic issues. However, in my own mind, I would like to just get a bit more of an in-depth understanding of what the options might be. With regard to the density, I think there are still some questions around density as well. I do support Councillor Cronin's reduced R10 density. I think there are still some questions around the R60. I know that we had some conversations in council, and there are some councillors that do support that higher density. I think Councillor Cronin, you're a bit of an advocate for the higher density in some of these developments. And I can see pros and cons for that little bit of higher density, but I just would like a little bit more time to consider and I know that the developer doesn't have to commit to the density necessarily at this point, but I would like to provide a bit more direction in that regard, and whether or not we put a bit lower density with some very high density, or we can, anyway, that's what I would like a little bit more time to consider. Therefore, I will be supporting Councillor Cronin's amended alternate recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we've all spoken. Councillor Cronin, your right of reply.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Number of points raised. I'll particularly go through them in order, so I might be jumping around. Traffic is horrendous, above horrendous, which came from Councillor Ryan. It really sort of goes to the root of what I'm trying to talk about, and what the residents have really been pushing is their concerns over safety. At the end of the day, how that intersection is designed is critical. And as I said, we are being asked to approve this and send it through to WAPC. Now, the WAPC, from Freedom of Information that we asked, said Abbey PIA is well suited to more intensive forms of urban development. So the WAPC are keen for this to be heavily developed, and we as councillors, it was raised by one of the members of the public, do represent the public.
Councillor Cronin, you must stick to rebuttal of arguments from councillors, not the gallery.
Okay. So you mentioned that staff were pushing for smaller blocks. Well, I sat with Councillor Riccelli with the planning division, and they actually advise us on that new map with regards to the R10s. So they have come back with some secondary ideas on how that should look. Then we talk about the urban to open space. Again, I've raised those concerns, and also I do commend Rise Urban for their designs in adding so many open areas. And we are very much pushed, as Councillor Carter said, that we need to be considerate of cost of living, affordable blocks, and again, as Councillor Cox raised then about the R60s, I have always pushed for some very heavy density areas so that people with not so much money can buy smaller blocks, apartments or whatever they are, so that they have the opportunity to get on that ladder in a particular area that they live. Maybe their parents are living in Vass or in Abbey. So at the end of the day, this is just us pushing something through, giving it to WAPC. It has been a long day, hasn't it? Got here at 9. And we are purely offering some recommendations as in attachment G. And that's all I'm asking, is that we have a little more time to adjust what we are putting in attachment G with regards to two particular areas. And therefore, councillors, I ask that you do vote this way and go for my alternative recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cronin. With that, I close debate and put the motion. Those in favour of the amended alternative recommendation? Opposed? Is carried 6-2. Councillors, we have received an item of urgent business. The item is confidential in nature and will be considered at item 20.1. In order to vote on this item, I'll seek a decision to accept the report as an item of urgent business under 5.91B1 of the Standing Orders Local Law 2018, as it practically cannot wait inclusion into the next agenda meeting. Do I have a mover to accept the report? Move Councillor Carter. Is there a seconder? Seconded Councillor Payne. Is there opposition? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? It is carried 8-0 to accept the item. Councillors, at item 20, we have a report of a confidential nature in accordance with section 5.232C and D of the Local Government Act 1995. This report has been provided to councillors and the CEO only. In order to maintain confidentiality of this item, I will seek a decision to close the meeting to members of the public and all staff. Do I have a mover to close the meeting to the public? Move Councillor Payne, second Councillor Cronin. Is there any opposition? There's not. I'll put the motion. Those in favour? It is carried 8-0. We are restreaming. Item 20.1, the motion was carried 7-1 that the council adopt the officer recommendation as outlined in this report. With that and there being no further business, I declare this meeting of council closed. The next meeting will be held on the 26th of July, and thank you all for your attendance.